the family of Zeus. There are 14 major deities in the Greek world: Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Hephaestus, Ares, Apollo, Artemis, Demeter, Aphrodite, Athena, Hermes, and Dionysus. Over time, however, it was reduced to 12, and that's why we think of the 12 Olympians. Hades, because he lives under the earth, and he really isn't on Olympus that often, he doesn't really count as part of the Olympic Council. And then Hestia was removed. She still is really important, but she doesn't take part in the council so much, and so she's replaced really by Dionysus. Now, Hestia is a virgin goddess, goddess of the hearth and the sacred fire. Every city worships Hestia, and she's sort of a goddess of the good things that should exist in a home. The head of the Olympic Council, of course, is Zeus. He's often called father of gods and men. Some things we know about Zeus, you've probably heard if you know anything about mythology, or you've heard from stories we've already told, is that Zeus's defining characteristic is that he is amorous. He loves beautiful women, and he's always chasing them around, having all sorts of affairs. And because of that, he has a lot of children by a lot of different humans and goddesses. He is associated with thunder and lightning as we saw is his special province. He uses it as a weapon to control, to destroy, and to really announce his presence. Beyond that, he also bears the Aegis, and the Aegis is his shield. It's a goatskin covered shield, and it has the head of the Gorgon on the front of it. Now, this isn't something that he uses that often. It's associated with him, and it's his shield, but really we'll see that he lends it out to Athena. Athena is the one who is also associated with it. And the story is she shakes the shield on the field of battle, and then terror just sweeps through the ranks. Aside from chasing women and incinerating things with his lightning bolts, he also exemplifies divine justice. So he is this ultimate symbol of the role of the gods in ordering humanity and in keeping things moving in the right direction. Different authors portray him differently, and we'll certainly see that in this course. Ovid likes the romantic version of Zeus, and he likes to see him chasing women about and doing things like that. Hesiod, on the other hand, really prefers him as this arbiter of justice, and he is ultimately a being of good. However else we see him, though, he's never an absolute patriarch, and we never see an absolute patriarchy. He's not a dictator in the sense that he has control over every aspect of fate, because there's always the fate that exists beyond the realm of the gods. There seems to be some order beyond what the gods actually control, as we saw where it was fated that one god will overthrow another, something like that. We'll also see that Aphrodite has a lot of power over him. Love itself has power over him, so he is swayed by his emotions and his passions. In one sense, possibly Aphrodite is the strongest of the gods, because she can manipulate them and move them into feeling passionately about one thing or another. We can't talk about Zeus without also talking about Hera, his wife, and his sister. We see that marriages between brothers and sisters is common among the gods. That's not something we can say about Greco-Roman society in general. It was illegal in Greco-Roman society for brothers and sisters to marry, in most of the Greek world anyway. But it's something that existed among the gods. Now, this deserves some comment, because sometimes we believe that what happens among the gods in the Greco-Roman stories is a reflection of Greek society itself. Maybe to some extent there is truth in that, but not always. The Greeks and the Romans did believe that things existed in the heavens for divine purposes, and that is beyond what humans can understand. And this is one of those examples. So it didn't bother them that there was interaction, sexual interaction, or marriage between close family members among the divine, but certainly not among them on earth. Another thing we see here is a traditional marriage between sky god and earth goddess. Whereas Zeus is a god of the sky and he controls lightning and thunder, Hera is a god of the home. She is a goddess of mothers and goddess of wives, and that's why she's so protective of her rights as mother and as wife. Whereas Zeus chases down women to sleep with them, to seduce them, Hera chases them down to punish them, as wives traditionally would want to do, I suppose. Things that we should associate with her or pay attention to when we're seeing pictures of her, obviously the peacock, which you see in the picture here, but also she's called Hera the White-Armed and Hera the Ox-Eyed. Ox-Eyed is one, Homer uses both of these, but Ox-Eyed shows up a lot, the Ox-Eyed goddess. And I always imagine her with these giant cow eyes looking out, which makes for an interesting picture, I think. If Zeus is a god of justice, then Hera is goddess of women, of mothers, of morality, and of marriage. Zeus and Hera have a number of children, some of whom are more important than others. Eileithyia is a goddess of childbirth, and she shares this role with Hera, and they both are expected to help when mothers are bearing children. Hebe is the goddess of youthful bloom, and she's the primary cupbearer of the Olympians. You'll notice her, you can see the statue there, where she's holding out the cup. Eventually, she marries Heracles. Hebe was eventually replaced in her role as cupbearer by Ganymede, who was a young Trojan prince. One of the stories is that Zeus was overwhelmed by the beauty of the young boy and visited him in the form of an eagle and carried him away to Olympus, where he would be the cupbearer. This story itself has a number of different interpretations. Earlier myth, it's one about apotheosis. It's about a boy or about a human who, by virtue of their goodness or their beauty or some defining characteristic, some extraordinary characteristic, ascends the heavens and becomes divine. By the 5th century BC, this had changed a bit because mores had changed, society had changed, and it becomes more of a sexual relationship between the older Zeus and the young boy. There was a custom by the 5th century, especially in some parts of Greece, whereby an older man would take an interest in a young boy. And by young boy, we're talking really early teens. For the most part. Once you start growing a beard, you're more or less off limits. You don't really have a lot of same-sex relationships among men of the same age. What you have is an older man and a younger boy. Before they have that beard, they're kind of fair game. And so the 5th century Athenians then, and the other people of the age, saw Zeus as taking part in this traditional relationship then. Another divine child is Hephaestus, the god of the forge, and he is linked with Athena as a patron of skill, wisdom, crafts, and the arts. The defining thing about him is that he was possibly lame from birth, or he is lame for most of his life. One of the reasons for that has been ascribed to his parthenogenetic birth. Possibly he's just the child of Hera. Hera was angry, so the story goes, that Zeus had born Athena on his own without her, and so she decided to have a child of her own. But of course she's Hera and not Zeus, and she can't quite do it perfectly, so her child comes out lame. Another story is that he was cast out of Olympus by Hera because she didn't like him, and he became lame. And then another is that he was cast out of Olympus by Zeus because he was trying to protect Hera from Zeus one day. In any event, he's a lame god, and so he hobbles a lot, and he's a source of jokes and insults from the other gods sometimes, but he's also a very powerful god. Other than Zeus, he might be the strongest physically, and he is an extraordinary craftsman and can create anything. And as I said, he is the defender of Hera. That's his mom. He's always taking her side. But he's also the husband of Aphrodite. So you have this traditional Beauty and the Beast type marriage. Marriage of beauty with deformity, or the intellectual and the sensual. Unfortunately, she is not a chaste wife, and she likes to run around just as Zeus does. And she's always falling in love with this man or that man. One of her favorite consorts is Ares, and so Aphrodite and Ares joining together adds insult, really, to Hephaestus, because he has to endure the gods running around. Ares, whom he can't really challenge, is a god of war, and his beautiful wife. One day, though, he does create a net and catches them in the act of lovemaking together, and then he parades them naked in front of all the other gods to see and shows what he had found. They were humiliated But he was humiliated also, because the reaction of some of the other gods was, first of all, you really shouldn't be bragging that your wife is sleeping with someone else. This does not reflect well on you. And another is, I would certainly endure that net in order for a chance with Aphrodite. In any event, he doesn't come off well, but it is a funny story that they like to tell sometimes on Olympus. Ares is probably everyone's favorite god who gets almost no stories. He's a god of war, but he's a god of the destruction of war, the horror of war. Zeus and Athena are also gods of war, but they take on more the intellectual form, the counseling and the planning and the strategy. Ares just likes slaughter, and so there's a certain amount of ambivalence toward him. He's a god, but people are afraid of him. Zeus doesn't even really seem to like him. You see that in the Iliad, where he calls him the most hated of all the gods. But he does run around with Aphrodite, and in some stories he is the father of Eros with Aphrodite. The Romans especially honor him as Mars, though, and he becomes the father of the Roman race, as the father of Romulus and Remus, who are the ones who eventually found Rome and the Roman people themselves. As I mentioned, Zeus has children with other beings also, and with Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, he has 9 children, I guess you could say, the 9 muses. There are different numbers at different times, but eventually 9 is the number settled upon, and they have different duties, different responsibilities. Calliope is the muse of epic poetry, Clio of history, Euterpe of lyric poetry, Melpomene of tragedy, Terpsichore of choral dancing, Erato of love poetry, Polyhymnia of sacred music, Urania of astronomy, and Thaleia of comedy. According to some, Zeus and Themis are the parents of the 3 Fates, although some say it's Night and Erebus. The 3 Fates are the ones who control the fates of all mortals and, well, all beings. Clotho is the spinner of the thread of life, Lachesis measures out the thread, and Atropos cuts the thread at the end of your life. And so when you come to the end of your life, Atropos has cut off that thread. Sometimes the fates are unified into the goddess Moira, who is closer to fortune or luck, random chance. Things just happen. And this brings up this notion of the interplay between the gods and fate. And I brought this up a little bit earlier. From one point, then, no matter how powerful the gods are, they're always overpowered by the fates. You can never escape the things that are fated to happen, the things that are going to happen. And so even the gods are subject to those forces. This is the end of this lecture and the end of this module. Obviously, there are a lot of gods left we didn't talk about who are part of the Olympians and part of the family of Zeus, but we'll take those up in the next module.